Welcome to the Friday Habit with Benjamin Manley and Mark Labriola II.
The Friday Habit is for creators, entrepreneurs, and agency owners looking for actionable ideas on how to grow their business and be more profitable.
We'll pull from our combined knowledge of over 20 years and interview thought leaders that will inspire you and give you the motivation you need to kick your business into high gear. Buckle up. It's Friday.
Tyler Pigott is the founder and chief growth officer at Lone Fir Creative, a completely remote 18-person inbound marketing team. And today we're going to ask his advice on growing our teams and pitfalls that we can avoid along the way. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
There we go. Hey, and you know what? We're going to actually pick from our conversation cards today. We got would you rathers and open-ended questions. So I'm going to go ahead and randomly pick here so that we can get to know you a little bit better and break the ice, as they like to say.
Sounds great. Let's do it.
All right. What is your favorite season and why?
Oh, that's a great question. Man, I like all the seasons, but if I had to pick one around here, so I live in the Pacific Northwest, south of Seattle, and the summertime is like the glory months. It kind of reminds you of why you waited through all the rain and the dark gray and all that kind of stuff. So the summertime's definitely my favorite. Outside all the time, on the water, playing golf or hanging out or riding a bike or whatever. I love being outside. So
I've been to Seattle 3 times and Portland once.
Yeah.
When I was in Portland, it was like rainy and gloomy for like 2 weeks straight. It was miserable. And then the first time I went to Seattle, rainy and gloomy. The second time I went to Seattle, I'm like, why would anybody want to live here? And then on the third time, it was like sunny and beautiful. And you could see this little like mountain volcano thing off in the distance. And I was like, whoa, this place is like heaven on earth. It's just always just hidden all the time.
Totally. It's like July through September. It's like, yes. And we generally try to tell people not to come during that time because then they'll just want to move. But there is some rough months here too. So
yeah. My personal favorite season is fall. I got married in the fall, and in Colorado where I'm at, the leaves start changing. There's like this crisp in the air. And it's funny because as things are dying is when I feel like so alive.
That is a great quote. We're gonna write that one down. When things are dying, I feel so alive. Awesome. I was just gonna say, The Office season 1 is my favorite season. I don't know if you guys like that one.
It's very. There's a lot of different ways you could take that.
Exactly. I like that. It's a very uncomfortable season, but I highly recommend it.
And if you don't like The Office, it's great because it's only like 6 episodes.
Right. Exactly. Well, Tyler, I'm super glad you're on the show. Just to set the stage a little bit of why I really wanted to talk to you is, so I have a company called Knapsack. It's a web design company. Right now, we are currently 6 people. We just went from 5 to 6 people. And I've been hovering around that kind of size for the last several years. And I really like that size of team. I feel like it's somewhat manageable. There's a lot of things I really enjoy about having a small team. But what I'm thinking about is, should I grow my team? Should I make my team larger? And I want to know, like, what are some of the pitfalls I might find along that way? So that's kind of the whole reason I want to have this conversation, is to learn more about what it's like running a larger team. And since you have a larger team, I would love to ask you a lot of questions about that. I know Mark is in a somewhat similar situation. I'd say, Mark, would you agree you're kind of like on that verge of like thinking about a bigger team, or where are you at with that?
Yeah, I think one of the things I always get caught up in is this idea of, when I first started 12 or 13 years ago now, it was just me running gun. And then I, was doing it part-time, kind of side hustle. And then I got to the place where I was full-time, and it was still me running gun, spinning all the plates. And then I started to get so much work where I was like, okay, I need to bring in some people and to kind of help me manage all this work that I was doing. And so, slowly started growing the team. And, at this point, I'm like, man, I really enjoy the autonomy and the freedom that I have. I've been able to work myself out of all the doing, if you will, and more focus on, team building and business development, different things like that. And I'm really enjoying that part of it, as far as, doing research and trying to figure out different markets and, looking at the finances and the budgets and all that other kind of stuff. And so part of me is like, okay, I'm in this really comfortable place. So if I grow this thing, will it turn into a job all of a sudden where I have like too much stuff to do? And then it's like, oh man. So I guess that's kind of, where I'm at. It's kind of where it's like, well, I do want more money. So I need to grow in order to do that. But then I also don't want to rob myself of all the autonomy and freedom I've created.
Yeah. Yeah, these are great. Like, yes, absolutely.
Soul searching here. Yeah.
It totally is. I mean, it's interesting because I feel like, and I know that we're going to dive into some like maybe more targeted specific questions, but kind of overall, I feel like for me, it was what do you want to build? Like what excites you? Like what's the thing that you get up out of bed and you're excited to build? And I know for me, my personality is wired as a builder. So the minute I start to kind of transition into maybe like maintenance, if you will, I hate that word, but at the same time, like it kind of shifts to that at some point.
Yeah.
I kind of get bored and I know I've got a little bit of a shelf life as far as how long I'll last. And so I knew that. And then I think the second piece of it for me was I feel like for most of my career, I've always had this vision of being able to build something that's out of reach in what I personally can do. And so it can be as simple as, a design for, a design for a website. And it's like, oh, I want this feature, this function. I want the design to look this way, but I can't quite, use Figma or use Photoshop or whatever to get that. And so then it was like, I think now like transpose that across every marketing effort. And it was kind of that feel for most of my career. And so for me, like add those two pieces together of like, I'm a builder and I can envision things that are bigger than what I can personally create on my own. And it obviously translated into hiring a bunch of people that are amazing at what they do. So that's where it started at. And so for people listening and for you guys, I think it's just like, hey, what are you good at? And what do you want to do? I feel like I've talked to a lot of people that, they might be in that similar spot where they're, maybe four, five, six people on their team and I really want to grow. And you kind of ask why. And you're like, no, I don't know if you should, I think you're good,
Yeah.
And then there's others that are resistant because it's uncomfortable or that's really what they want to do, but they don't know what to do next or what step to take next. And so I think it kind of goes back to that a little bit.
So explain to me a little bit about how you got to where you are. I mean, in the sense of, where did you come from and what was that first growing like pain or that first moment where you felt like, okay, I need to grow?
Yeah. Great question. I am a big like goals person. So my kind of deal is like, hey, I can't swim 2 laps in the pool, but I should probably register for an Ironman. It's kind of like that kind of a weird, I don't know. I don't wish that on anyone. That's kind of a weird personality. And so I think for me, it's always been like reach for those big, BHAGs, those big, hairy, audacious goals that are out there that are not within reach. It's not, if it's within reach, it's kind of, I guess so, go for it. But that's kind of just more of a task. And so I think that's been for me. As far as kind of where I come from, I spent about 15 years in corporate communications and PR across a couple different companies, biotechs, a couple startups, and got the opportunity to run a consumer products division of a company for a couple different years or a couple years leading up to what I was doing. And then at probably kind of 2014-ish, beginning of 2015, had the opportunity to kind of transition out of that. And I live in near Seattle. And so you can imagine the big opportunities around here, those Amazons, Googles, Microsofts, Starbucks, those. And if you don't want to work at those, I was kind of like, well, what do I want to do? What's the jobs do I want if I don't want to commute and I don't want to move? And so it was pretty quick for me to go, hey, I think I might want to try my own gig, and I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I've always wanted to start my own thing, and why not? Let's go for it. And so at that point, let's see, my kids were 5 and 3, maybe, or 4 and 6. I don't remember the exact math, but roughly there. So it's a horrible time potentially to start a business. But at the same time, it made sense at that time for me, and so. Kind of slowly, gradually got into things, one project leads to another. And, if you're saying yes to things, maybe you wish you wouldn't have because they have a checkbook they're going to write you and pay you for it and such. And so probably not dissimilar to how a lot of people, get started with that. I think for me, I knew that having a team was where I was gifted. Like that's just where I had a talent. I had a skill about building a team and finding the right people and networking and pulling people in. And so it was like, oh, I think if I got this project and I like kind of, farmed out this thing, maybe I could have a better result at the end and the client might be happier. And then I kind of, fast forward a year or whatever and had kind of a team of contractors. And then kind of got to that spot and realized, well, man, I'm still the glue that keeps everything together. I still can't take a day off. I still can't miss an email. I still, because it's 100% relied on you and your brand, essentially, individually. And so I think then it was pretty, I guess, I think, Ben, you said earlier, like soul searching, kind of, hey, how do I transition then into maybe not being the Tyler Pigott show, but like, what is Lone Fir Creative actually? Because, there wasn't anything that was separated from my name and who I was compared to what the business was. And so I think I just started chasing down that road and then quickly got to where we're at now.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. And I looked at your website a little bit ahead of time. I know we've talked in person a little bit before, but I would love to know a little bit more about, it seems like you have a really great team culture from what I can tell, from the outside. So I would love to know like what kind of culture you're trying to build in your team and like, what do you do intentionally to kind of foster that?
Yeah. Great question. It's different for every company, and I know that. I think for me, I would say I've tried to take the things I didn't like about past jobs and just do the opposite.
Yeah.
But as we've grown, it's gotten to be a bigger deal because it really is, I would say it's pretty easy to hire the first person, to be honest, because you're kind of like jack of all trades, lots of hats. They're kind of, I think I could hang out with them. They're great, and then you grow and grow and grow. And then it's like, for us, person 18 was actually really challenging because they have to fit. They have to fit into their department. They've got to fit in their team. You've got to have multiple people that approve them, So as far as kind of like what we put into the culture, we spend a lot of time, or at least I've spent a lot of time over the years, really kind of trying to figure out, well, where do I want to work? Like, just actually like, what do I get excited about, And I think I spent a lot of time in a previous career traveling a lot. So it's kind of, half the month I was gone and on a plane or whatever. And I didn't like missing stuff with my family. And so I swung the opposite direction and like, hey, let's build an office in your house and work at home all the time. And so that kind of started that remote team and then tried to figure out, well, what does remote culture look like? It's not, you're not reheating lunch together in the break room and you're not passing by each other and going out to lunch or grabbing a coffee or whatever. Like, none of that exists because for us, we're across state lines at this point, multiple states. And so we've had to kind of just figure that out. And so I think I've really valued transparency in past jobs that I've had and really been disappointed when there isn't transparency. And so I think for me, that's been a big piece. So just being transparent and being, if you make a choice, try to educate the person that might be impacted by that choice and help them along the way, And so I think it's been, that open, honest kind of culture has been really big. And I know that they're almost like those are buzzwords.
Yeah, I was going to ask you just specifically. So, what would be an example of like, what's not transparency, or like what's an example of something where you feel like, hey, most companies wouldn't be transparent in this situation, but hey, or maybe in past jobs somebody wasn't transparent with you, but you are. Like, what are some examples of that?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say in past jobs, I remember in a past job kind of being given a responsibility, but not given authority. And so those are two different things. Responsibility is, hey, can you do this? And authority is actually being able to get it done and make decisions. And so I think that's been a big piece of it as far as transparency goes, because you're wanting to know once you're given both of those pieces, that responsibility and authority, you're wanting to know why. Like, what's it impacting? What's going to be the result if I don't do it versus if I do? Is it a financial thing? Is it a freeing up people's time? Is it life or death? Is it, whatever that reasoning is? And so I think we've tried really hard to kind of communicate and process, well, what does success look like? Whether it's a task, whether it's a role, whether it's a season or a quarter initiative or something that we're working on, like, what does success actually look like as you're, trying to pass, a task or a thing to somebody else on your team? So I would say that's a piece of transparency. For me, budget really has been. I'm a numbers guy, love spreadsheets. And so in past jobs that I've had, when people don't share the numbers, you're kind of going, well, so did what I do move any needles? Did it, impact the bottom
Right.
line at all? Was it just so the more information generally people have, the more they're willing to dive in or ask more informed and better questions to help make whatever you're, working on even better. And so I guess those are some practical examples, I suppose, of trying to just include transparency. But
Now, did you always have a remote team? Was it, or did you maybe start with a small office and have some people join you there, and then you had some remote and some local people, or have you always just been like remote?
Yeah, we've always been remote. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, the first contractor I hired was in Phoenix, and I'm in Seattle area. So multiple states. It was always so funny. So practical example. Obviously, recording this in March 2021. A year ago, I remember people like texting me, go, "Hey, have you heard of Zoom?" And you're like, yeah, I've been a paying customer of Zoom for years, and it's just kind of one of those just funny things of people kind of jumping into it. But yeah, that's really how it started was, FaceTime or text or whatever, before we jumped into Slack and all those types of tools.
Yeah.
But it's always been remote and kind of trying to find the best people where we can find them. So
right. And is that also to the model as far as built on more of a contractor model than like a full-time W-2 employee, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it used to be for sure. Every employee at this point, they're 100% W-2 employees on salary with benefits and all that good stuff. So that was a big change for me in beginning of 2019, I believe. We kind of just started converting people, and then we've hired people since then. But a lot of it for me was wanting to build that culture. If you're working with W-2s, it's different than if you're working with contractors, and wanting to be able to get to the spot of where I'm building something and able to pass off responsibility and actually, know that thing or whatever it is actually going to get accomplished because those people are being quote unquote graded on it,
Right. Yeah. It's not like, oh yeah, I'll get to that tonight after I'm done with, going on. It's like, okay.
Totally.
But I kind of need that now.
Totally. Yeah. And it's been really interesting too, because honestly, like every time we've hired, that's been a drastic increase in so many different areas every time we've hired someone as a W-2 comparatively to when you find that new contractor. And it is from skill set improvement to efficiencies to capabilities to all those types of things compared to like if I just hired a contract developer or a designer or a copywriter or something. And they're great. And we work with some right now because it's great to expand with that and, and trying to search out people and test them, if you will, as far as their capabilities go. But as we've hired people, the business has grown exponentially every time we've added a W-2 employee to the mix because of the fact that they, you delegate different things and they pick up the ball with different things and you can accomplish so much more when you kind of have access to people, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah. And then do you find that that's well received? Like when someone's applying for a job and then it's like, oh no, you can stay where you are. Is that, you think, well received, or people are like, oh, I thought I was going to be able to like come to an office and like hang out with a group of cool people?
Totally. No, it's a good question. I would say it's part of our, vetting process at this point. So we'll go through hundreds of applications at this point. And so, you're required to talk about your remote experience and you're required to upload a video and talk about who you are and give us a quick intro and some of the practicals about, if you are working remotely. So I would say it's a kind of a baked in expectation at this point in both directions. Even in the beginning days, I think it was pretty clear that, hey, I don't live where you live, and probably we're not going to have an office, separate places, kind of deal. So, we've kind of, early days, it was maybe a couple more conversations around it, and then even now it's gotten 10 times easier because so many more people are leaving their jobs if they're going back to an office and they liked working remote or something. Yeah. So they're looking for it. So.
Well, and that's the biggest thing I'm trying to figure out. Because before, we were a small team, but we were all in an office space, and I think there was some camaraderie there and things like that. And then when COVID hit and it was like, okay, we all have to work remotely, and then all of our clients are remote too. So every meeting we have, they're in their homes and we're in our homes. And in the past, there was a stigma in my mind of like, okay, if I'm not a company with an actual physical space and a location, then I'm not going to be taken as seriously. And I need to have like my offices, in a certain location in order for me to be legitimate. But I feel like that stigma is kind of going away now, especially with COVID. But I mean, I guess that's just encouraging to hear that you're saying, hey, you can build a remote company or a company with all remote employees, and people are happy and fine with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that I feel like I've learned, and especially even watching over the last year, because so many people ask this question of, oh, you've been remote before, the pandemic. Well, yeah. And a lot of people just start asking, well, how do you do things? And so it's the practicals of staff meetings, or it's meeting with clients. And we didn't start in an office. So we didn't go, oh, let's get Zoom and let's try to do this and let's try to have this camera and let's do this. And we didn't try to replicate something we used to do in person. And so for us, it started remotely. And so our processes are remote. Our communications all remotely. Our sales process is remote. We use video in our sales process. We use tool, so it was never trying to replace something and then just trying to do it as well as maybe it would have been done in person or whatever. It's a whole different process for us, or a whole different kind of creation of a company. So I think that that's been a huge learning process as we've gone, as far as kind of even attracting people that are, thinking it'd be cool to work remotely, just because that's just how we roll. It's not, we're not losing any like authenticity. We're not losing any excellence, any of those types of things by having a remote team. So yeah, it's kind of it's a funny deal to figure out though.
Yeah, we did an episode 52, with David Burkus. It's a 2-part episode, 52 and 53, on how to build culture on a remote team. And, he's been really pushing in, to writing books and kind of, he's a kind of a thought leader in that space. So if you're listening and you're interested more in about building culture and remote teams, check out episode 52 with David Burkus. All right, we're going to pause this conversation here. Go to thefridayhabit.com. There you can find show notes for this episode. There you can also find links to our websites and ways to get in touch. At the bottom of the page, you can download our guide to the Friday Habit System that will show you how to set aside one full day each week dedicated to working on your business instead of in your business. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear next week's episode, subscribe so you get notified. Also, leave us a review in Apple Podcast app or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you want to potentially be on one of our episodes with a question you ask us, go ahead and record a quick message in your phone, voice memo, and email it to hello@thefridayhabit.com. Until next time, live every day like it's Friday.